When a single dad janitor was mocked by a billionaire CEO in front of her entire board, no one expected he'd end up changing her company and her heart forever. This is the story of pride, persistence, and a $100 billion lesson in humility. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the empty halls of Novachain Enterprises, their cold white glow reflecting on spotless marble floors that whispered under Ethan Cole's mop. It was nearly midnight when the day's chaos turned into the janitor's silence. The company's top executives had long gone home, leaving behind the scent of strong coffee, expensive perfume, and the ghosts of billion-dollar conversations. Ethan worked quietly, his navy uniform damp with sweat, his mind drifting between exhaustion and dreams he no longer spoke aloud. In the corner of the break room, his 10-year-old son Liam sat cross-legged with an old tablet, finishing math homework by the light of a vending machine. Every so often, Ethan glanced over, smiling at the boy's focus. Liam looked up, grinning. "Dad, when we get our own place again, can I have a desk like the one in that office?" Ethan nodded. "One day, buddy. Maybe even bigger." But deep down, he wondered how many more one days they could afford. Ethan hadn't always been a janitor. Years ago, he'd worn suits, not uniforms. He'd worked as a junior analyst in finance until the market crash and his wife's sudden illness shattered everything. Medical bills drained their savings, and when she passed, grief and debt swallowed the rest. The only job he could find fast enough to keep a roof over Liam's head was cleaning the same kind of office he once dreamed of running. Yet while most people would have let the world beat them down, Ethan refused to stop learning. During his breaks, he'd sit on an overturned bucket, eyes fixed on his phone, studying stock charts, crypto trends, and market movements as if they were maps leading him home again. He read white papers like novels and watched finance lectures instead of movies. Each number, each term, blockchain, tokenization, leverage, was a brick in the staircase he was building back to his dream. Tonight felt no different, but something in the air carried possibility. Maybe it was the way the city lights outside flickered like distant stars through the glass tower's windows, or maybe it was the quiet hum of destiny preparing to stir. Ethan opened his phone and studied a chart showing a sudden drop in a coin he'd been tracking for weeks. "It's manipulation," he murmured to himself, analyzing data faster than some interns upstairs could have. He didn't realize that through the darkened conference room's glass, someone was watching him, someone who didn't belong on this floor at midnight. Victoria Hale, the CEO of Novachain, stood silently near the doorway, her sharp eyes narrowing in curiosity. She had come back to retrieve her laptop, but what she found instead was her janitor studying market analytics like a pro. As Ethan's tired eyes scanned the data, unaware of her gaze, a small, wry smile appeared on Victoria's face. She admired ambition, even in the unlikeliest corners. And though she didn't know it yet, this quiet janitor and his late-night dreams were about to turn her empire upside down. Victoria Hale wasn't a woman who believed in accidents, only opportunities cleverly disguised as them. The founder and CEO of Novachain Enterprises, she had built her empire from scratch, turning a simple blockchain startup into one of the most powerful crypto firms on the planet. Known for her razor-sharp instincts and ice-cold composure, she ruled her company with quiet authority, commanding fear and admiration in equal measure. That night, as she returned to retrieve her laptop from her office, she noticed a faint glow in the conference room. Through the glass, she saw Ethan Cole hunched over his phone, eyes flicking over charts, muttering financial terms that only trained analysts would know. For a moment, she simply watched, intrigued by the strange scene, a janitor buried in market data, as if he were planning to buy the company himself. Finally, curiosity overcame her silence. She stepped into the room, her heels clicking like a metronome of control. "Are you trading crypto on company Wi-Fi, Mr. Cole?" she said, her voice smooth yet cutting. Ethan jerked upright, startled, nearly dropping his phone. He turned to see her, the woman from the portraits lining the hallway, the billionaire everyone in the building whispered about. "Oh, Ms. Hale," he stammered. "I wasn't trading, just learning. watching market movements, trying to understand how the algorithms react to volume spikes. Victoria tilted her head slightly, intrigued but skeptical. Learning? She repeated. You're the janitor, right? Not exactly the department we trust with billions of dollars. A few late-working executives nearby chuckled quietly. Ethan straightened his back, his voice steady despite the heat of embarrassment rising in his chest. That's true, he said, but anyone can learn if they care enough. Titles don't make talent. Time does. His words hung in the air like a challenge, and Victoria's expression shifted from amusement to intrigue. No one ever spoke to her like that. With a cool smirk, she crossed her arms. All right then, Mr. Cole, let's test that theory. She gestured toward the massive digital screen on the wall, displaying real-time crypto markets. Let's say I give you a chance to play in the big leagues. If you're half as sharp as you sound, prove it. Ethan frowned, unsure if she was serious. Prove it how? Victoria's smirk widened. Close a partnership deal worth at least $100 billion by Friday. If you do, I'll triple your salary and put you somewhere far above janitorial work. If you fail... She paused, her tone chilling. You'll pack your things and never set foot in this building again. The executives burst into laughter. $100 billion? He can't even afford a tie, one muttered. But Ethan didn't laugh. He looked her straight in the eyes and said quietly, I'll do it. The room fell silent, surprised by his calm certainty. Victoria studied him for a long moment, her eyes unreadable. Then she gave a single nod. Challenge accepted, she said, turning to leave. As she walked away, a faint spark of something unfamiliar flickered inside her, curiosity mixed with respect. She didn't know whether she'd just witnessed foolish bravery or the beginning of something extraordinary. But one thing was certain. The janitor's quiet conviction had just earned him her full attention. The week that followed was nothing short of madness. From the moment Victoria Hale uttered that impossible dare, Ethan Cole felt the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. $100 billion crypto deal, even for an entire executive board, was near impossible, and for a janitor with no connections, it was suicide. But Ethan didn't see impossibility. He saw one final chance to prove that he was more than the uniform he wore. The next morning, while others were clocking out, Ethan sat in the employee lounge with his old laptop, the same one he'd fixed using spare parts from a recycling bin. He brewed cheap instant coffee, rolled up his sleeves, and started what would become 5 sleepless nights of relentless work. He spent hours reading blockchain contracts, decoding investment proposals, and studying Nova Chain's competitors. He barely noticed the sunrise through the office windows. When Liam called from school asking, "Dad, did you sleep?" Ethan smiled through bloodshot eyes and said, "Sleep is for people who already made it." By Tuesday, the exhaustion was brutal, but the fire inside him burned stronger. Ethan began reaching out to potential partners, not through expensive contacts or corporate ties, but through sheer persistence. He searched public databases, LinkedIn profiles, and industry forums until he stumbled upon something extraordinary. A small mention of Altura Tech, a global crypto platform struggling after a recent data breach. They needed stability, trust, and a new ally, something NovaChain could provide. They're desperate for reputation, Ethan whispered to himself, his heart racing. And we're desperate for a deal. Using NovaChain's public information and his deep research, he built a pitch deck overnight. He didn't have fancy presentation software or a corporate email address, just his conviction, a clear vision, and a story to tell. On Wednesday, he sent an email titled, "A Janitor's Proposal That Might Change Everything." It went straight to Altura Tech's CEO. Ethan expected silence, but fate had other plans. The next morning, his inbox pinged, "Let's talk." For a moment, Ethan just stared at the screen, tears welling up as if the universe had just whispered, "Keep going." He immediately set up a video call using his old phone, brushing his hair and straightening his uniform to look as professional as possible. When the call began, Altura Tech's team was skeptical, even amused, a janitor pitching a $100 billion merger. But when Ethan began to speak, something shifted. His words carried weight, raw, honest, and visionary. He spoke about how both companies could rebuild trust in a fragile market, how innovation should serve people, not pride, and how underdogs understood resilience better than anyone. By the end of the call, the executives weren't laughing. They were listening. That night, Ethan stood by the window overlooking the sleeping city. His reflection split between who he was and who he might become. The impossible was suddenly possible. He knew the next step would decide everything, not just his job, but his future, his son's future, and maybe even the heart of the woman who dared him to dream again. Friday morning arrived like a storm waiting to break. The towering glass of Nova Chain shimmered under the sunrise, but inside, tension hung thicker than fog. Every employee knew about the CEO's outrageous dare, that the janitor had been challenged to close a $100 billion deal. Most laughed behind his back, calling it a cleaning man's fantasy. Yet, as Ethan Cole walked through the lobby that morning, something about his calm, focused stride made even the mockery fade to whispers. He wore the same uniform, his name tag slightly crooked, but his eyes carried the quiet fire of a man who had already won a battle no one else saw. In his hand was his old phone, cracked screen, worn case, and within it the proof of what he had done. Up on the top floor, Victoria Hale stood by the boardroom window watching the skyline. Her team gathered around, smirking, ready to witness the end of the most absurd challenge in corporate history. She had invited the press, the directors, and half her executives, not out of cruelty but curiosity. "He asked for a chance," she said coolly. "Let's see what he does with it." The room fell silent as the doors opened and Ethan stepped inside. He didn't flinch beneath their stares. "Good morning," he said simply, placing his phone on the conference table. "You wanted a deal." "I brought one." The executives exchanged glances, holding back laughter. One of them sneered. "What did you do? Sell a mop contract for $1 billion?" Ethan ignored him, tapping the screen to open an email. "Yesterday I spoke with Altura Tech's CEO," he said. "They've been seeking stability after their data breach. I offered them a merger proposal, one that combines Nova Chain's infrastructure with their global reach." Victoria arched an eyebrow, arms crossed. "A merger?" she repeated. "You mean a conversation? I could get a meeting with Altura Tech tomorrow if I wanted." Ethan nodded. "You could, but you wouldn't get this." He turned up the volume on his phone as a voice echoed through the boardroom. "This is Maya Lin, CEO of Altura Tech. We've reviewed your proposal, Mr. Cole. Pending your CEO's approval, we're ready to proceed. Valuation stands at $100.2 billion. The room froze. Coffee cups clinked, pens dropped. For a long moment, no one spoke, until Victoria's expression shifted from disbelief to quiet awe. That's a confirmation?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded once. All it took was someone who believed a janitor could think like a strategist. The executives erupted in whispers, scrambling for their phones, already trying to spin the narrative. But Victoria didn't move. Her cold composure cracked just enough for a flicker of respect to shine through. She walked toward him, heels clicking on the polished floor. "You did the impossible," she said, voice low but sincere. Ethan smiled faintly. "No, ma'am," he replied. "You dared me to try. I just accepted." When she extended her hand, the room watched in stunned silence as the billionaire CEO shook the janitor's hand, not out of pity, but pride. The cameras clicked, and in that single moment, Ethan Cole wasn't just the man who cleaned the floors. He was the man who had rewritten the rules. The next morning, the world woke to a headline no one could have predicted. Janitor seals $100 billion crypto deal. Within hours, Ethan Cole's name flooded every news feed and financial network across the globe. Nova Chain's stocks soared overnight, and Victoria Hale, the brilliant, famously cold CEO, found herself facing a truth she couldn't ignore. The man she had once mocked had achieved something even her best executives hadn't. The media wanted interviews, investors wanted answers, and her board demanded to meet the man behind the miracle. But while the world celebrated, Ethan stayed the same, quiet, humble, grounded. When reporters asked for his secret, he simply said, "I just saw an opportunity nobody else was looking for." At the same time, Victoria sat in her office staring at the city skyline, her reflection trembling slightly in the glass. For the first time in years, she questioned her own pride. Success had made her untouchable, but it had also made her blind. Ethan's achievement wasn't just a fluke, it was proof that greatness doesn't always wear a tailored suit. That afternoon, she summoned him to her office. Ethan entered hesitantly, still in his work uniform, unsure whether this meeting was to celebrate or dismiss him. Victoria stood by her desk, arms crossed, but her usual sharpness had softened. "You know," she began quietly, "when I gave you that challenge, I didn't expect anything from it. It was supposed to be a lesson in humility. For you," she paused, meeting his eyes. "But it turns out the lesson was for me." Ethan shifted uneasily. "I didn't mean to embarrass anyone," he said. "I just wanted to show my son that we're never really stuck, not if we keep trying." Victoria smiled faintly, a rare warmth touching her expression. "You didn't embarrass anyone," she replied. "You reminded this entire company what hunger looks like. Somewhere along the way, I lost that." She turned to the window again, watching the skyline that once symbolized her victory. "I built this empire from nothing," she continued. "I thought I'd earned the right to judge who was worthy. You proved me wrong." Then she looked back at him, eyes clear. "I want you to join my team, Ethan, not as a janitor, but as head of strategic partnerships. You've got something most people here don't, instinct." For a moment, Ethan was speechless. He looked down at his calloused hands, the ones that had scrubbed floors for years, and felt tears threaten. I don't know if I belong up there," he admitted. Victoria smiled. "You earned your place. Don't question it." That evening, as Ethan walked out of the building with his son waiting outside, Liam ran to him and threw his arms around his waist. "Dad, you did it!" he shouted. Ethan laughed, holding him close. "No, kiddo," he whispered. "We did it." For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a man chasing redemption. He felt like a man who had finally caught it. And somewhere, high above, Victoria watched them leave, a quiet smile on her face, realizing that sometimes the best leaders are the ones who dare to learn from the people they least expect. Months passed, but the echo of that unbelievable deal still reverberated through the halls of Novachain. The janitor who had once been invisible was now a symbol of hope, not just within the company, but across the entire corporate world. Ethan Cole had officially become head of strategic partnerships, yet he never once forgot where he started. Every morning, he still greeted the cleaning crew by name, shared coffee with the security guard, and smiled at the receptionist who used to hand him mops instead of memos. To him, success wasn't about the corner office. It was about proving that second chances could build empires. Under his quiet but brilliant guidance, Novachain didn't just grow. It transformed. Ethan's humility became contagious. Employees started thinking differently. Leadership meetings opened to new voices, and innovation came not from pride, but from purpose. Victoria Hale, once known as the Iron Queen of crypto, found herself changed too. She'd spent her life chasing perfection, but after watching Ethan's rise, she began chasing something else, meaning. Their partnership, though built on a dare, evolved into a powerful alliance rooted in respect. Together, they launched the Nova Hope Initiative, a foundation that funded scholarships and tech training for single parents who wanted to rebuild their lives. At the press conference announcing the program, flashbulbs lit the stage like fireworks. Victoria took the podium first, her signature poise intact, but her tone warmer than ever before. "When I started Novachain," she said, "I believed success was built by those born for it. But one man reminded me that success is built by those who refuse to give up." She turned to Ethan, her eyes softening. "He taught me that talent can come from anywhere, even from the man mopping your floors." The crowd erupted in applause. Ethan stepped up next, adjusting his tie nervously before speaking. "I used to think people like me were meant to stay unseen," he said. "But this company, this woman, proved me wrong. What matters isn't where you start, it's the courage to start at all." His words struck something deeper than corporate pride. They touched every heart in the room. Somewhere in the audience, Liam watched his father with eyes full of pride and tears. The boy who used to wait in a janitor's break room was now watching his hero stand beside a billionaire, not as an employee but as an equal. As the applause swelled, Victoria leaned toward Ethan and whispered, "You changed everything." He smiled. "No," he replied quietly. "You just gave me the chance." Later that night, as the building lights dimmed and the city glimmered below, Ethan stood by the same window where he had once stared at a life that felt out of reach. The skyline hadn't changed, but he had. The dare that began as a test had become a legacy, a reminder that even the smallest spark of belief can ignite revolutions. Somewhere behind him, the faint echo of Victoria's heels approached. "Ethan," she said softly, "you ready for the next challenge?" He turned, smiling. "Always." If this story inspired you, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more powerful emotional tales, only on Drew Daily Stories. Because here, every story begins with a spark of hope.